Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the channel Learn From Basics. This is Joe here, and in today's video we're going to learn about what functions are, what return statements are, and how you can give inputs to a function. Now this is our 8th video on the series on this channel where we learn about one of the fastest growing programming languages called Flutter. Now we talked about what Flutter is, how it works, and why it's good in our previous videos on this series, so make sure you check those videos out before you get into this video. Now, in our last video on the series, we talked about the basics of Dart, like what void main does, why we have it, all the data types, and how to create variables, and we also learned how to print something onto the console. Now, please do go ahead and watch that video because, understanding all the concepts in that video is vital in order to understand all the concepts that are present in today's video. So, now, here's the thing I want to start off this video with. I want to start off with what makes a good program. What makes a good computer program, or what makes a good app? Well, the job of a computer program, or the job of a programmer, is to be as lazy as possible. Now that might sound a bit silly or a bit absurd, but that's the truth. If you think about it, you want your app to get the most done in the least steps or in the most efficient way, or be lazy. Now, lazy, you may think, is a bit of an exaggeration, and I agree, but that's just a way to visualize what a good app is. A good app is an app that can get a lot of work done using very little time and memory. Now, time and memory are the cost of a program. So a program may take up a lot of time and a lot of memory, and that's the cost of a program. Now, I want to give you guys a challenge. Now that we got that out of the way, I want to give you guys a challenge. I want you guys to make a program that will print or draw out 5 triangles on the console in the fastest, and not in the fastest, but I want you guys to draw 5 triangles on the console with the least amount of code. How about that? With the least amount of code in the void main function. So here's what a triangle would look like. So this is what a triangle would look like. Again, nothing too fancy, just, a simple little triangle. So, and then we would make that, that, and then one more. So we would put that up. And then last but not least, we would print down the base of the triangle. So that would be... Now that's a triangle in my point of view, you could say. Again, not the best triangle, but it's a triangle and it will suffice. And again, we learned about how to print stuff onto the console in our last video, so make sure you check that video out before you move on to this video. But if we run our program, you can see we have a triangle and we print the triangle. That's great and all, but here's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to print out this triangle. I want you guys to print out 5 of these triangles in the least amount of lines of code possible in the void main function. So how about you go ahead and do that? Pause this video and go ahead and do that. Now that's what I'm going to do too. So I'm going to write the code to print, 5 of these triangles, and we'll, see if we got the same code. So see you guys when you guys are done. So again, go ahead and pause this video, write the code down, and then come back. So, have you guys written the program? Now this is the program I came up with, and I'll tell you that this is not the most efficient program that you can write, but I'm expecting that most of you came up with a program that looks something like this. We basically took this code of the basic triangle and we rewrote it 5 times to create 5 triangles. Voila. Yeah, 5 triangles. There we go. So I'm going to bring that down. Now, as you can see, we have 5 triangles, and that's what I asked for. But I also did say that we want to produce these 5 triangles in the most efficient way possible, or using the least amount of line. So I'll tell you, what if I told you that we could do all of this? We could create these 5 triangles in a matter of 5 lines of code instead of 20 lines of code. Now that's such a big improvement from our current code, right? Because we're going to go from 20 lines of code to 5 lines of code. So how are we going to do that, you may ask? And again, I'm not counting the void main, this line and this line of code. We're just counting these lines of code. And this is just for an example again. So you may be wondering, well, how can we do that? Well, we can actually accomplish that task by just, printing out 5 triangles using 5 lines of code using something called a function. So what's a function? Well, I'll give you the official definition and then I'll explain that definition. A function is basically something in programming languages that groups a bunch of code. Not the best definition, I agree. But that's the definition of a function. Now let's go back and let's think about what a function is. Now a function is basically it's an idea in computer programming that you can use in order to take a bunch of code and assign that code a certain name. Now here's what I mean by that. Now in this program, if you want to create a function for a program, first you have to check, is there any code that's being repeated in this program? Well, you can see that these 5 lines of code are being repeated in this program, right? Now, what if, instead of writing these 5 lines of code every single time I want them to happen, what if I can assign these 5 lines of code a name, like maybe draw a triangle? What if I can assign a name to these 5 lines of code? And then make those 5 lines of code happen, right? Maybe make the computer just execute these 5 lines of code whenever I type in the name that's been assigned to that code. Now that's exactly what a function is. Now a function is basically when you give a name to a bunch of code and you tell the computer, hey computer, whenever this name or this function pops up in our void main program, I want you to execute these lines of code. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go ahead. So in order to create a function, you first of all say the name of the function, in this case, draw a triangle. And then you add these circle braces or brackets. So you open and close them. And I'll talk about why you're going to do that in a second. But that's what you do. And then you add curly brackets. So open and close. And inside these curly brackets, you write the code that you want to be executed whenever you call or write this name down in your program. So in this case, I want this code to execute, right? So let's go ahead and write that code down. So we can say print, and then let's write the string down. Semicolon, and then print again. Add a string. So we're basically drawing this triangle, right? Because we want this code to execute whenever we say, hey computer, draw the triangle, or whenever we call out this function. And then last but not least, now we have created a function. Good job. Again, a function is pretty easy. You write down the name of the function or the key of the function. You add a circle, open and closing circle brackets, and you actually call this the input area of a function, but we'll talk about why we call that because, when you know the usage of an input function, it's pretty obvious. So we write the name, the input function or the input area, and then we add curly brackets. We open and close the curly brackets and write some code inside that. Now, all of this is called the body of the function, or the code is called the body of the function. So now that we have that out of the way, how about instead of, writing these instead of, writing 5 lines of code to print a triangle, we can simply call our function or write the name of our function. And each time the name of our function appears, our computers or our program is going to be like, oh, okay, so since this name appeared, I'm going to execute this code. So whenever you write the name of a function, you're basically calling that function. So that's the technical term of writing, the name of a function in your void main function. So actually, it's called calling that function. So that's the official term, if you may. So in order to call a function, it's again really simple. you draw the name, you write down the name of the function, and then you say open and close circle brackets, and then a semicolon. How easy was that? So let's draw that again. Okay, so over here, I put triangle, not triangle. So let's go ahead and correct that. And again, you can give this function any name you want. It's just that, giving it a sensible name just makes reading the program or searching the program for errors much more easier. Since we have to draw 5 triangles, say that, draw triangle, triangle, and if we run the program, you'll see absolutely nothing changed. And that's because, well, our program's working as we want it to. And we have 5 triangles that have been printed, and that only used 5 lines of code. And again, as I said, if you remember the problem I've asked, we're only counting the code inside the void main function, not the code outside. So we were successful. We made code that took 20 lines of code to something shorter that took 5 lines of code. Now, normally in programming or in competitive programming contest, if you're interested in that, you're not being judged by how many lines of code you took. It's actually by how much time your code took and how much memory it took. And honestly, it doesn't matter how many lines of code you write as long as it's efficient. But I'm just saying this, so just for simpler. So maybe in our universe, in this small universe that we're creating right now, the amount of code, the lines of code, the shorter the code, the faster it is. But that's not reality. That's just for an example. Just putting that out. But as we know, that's what a function is. A function is basically whenever you give a bunch of code or multiple lines of code a name, and you tell the computer, hey computer, each time this name or this key appears in our program, I want you to execute the code in the body of that key or the code in the body of that function. So now we have, this draw triangle function, right? The next thing I want to do is I want to create another function. And let's actually erase all of this code because we're going to restart this. And this time we're actually going to create a function that's going to add 2 numbers for us. So again, I'm just going to delete everything. And in our next video, in our next section of this video, we're going to talk about what return statements are and what input statements are, or what the input, the circle brackets do, using a little program like a calculator program. So let's look at what those are right now. So in our last part, or in the last part of this video, we learned about what a function is and how we can make a function and parts of a function. Now, in this part of the video, we're going to learn about what return statements are and also what the input part of the function does and why we need it. So in order to do this, let's make a very simple game, right? Let's make 2 functions. One function that adds 2 numbers, so we can say add nums, and then this is how we create a function. And let's just declare the numbers in the function for now. We can say int a is 5, int b 6, and then we can say int c equal to a plus b. And then we can finally, that's add nums. And then let's make another function called multiply nums. And this function, we can just say int a equal to, again, let's say 7, int b equal to 8, int c equal to a times b. Now here's one thing to notice. Do you see how we declared 2 int a's and 2 int b's? Now it's important to know that whenever you declare a variable inside the function, you can only use that variable inside that function. So it's both a good thing and a bad thing. So for example, over here, if I were to say print a, you might think that we're either going to print 5 or 7, right? Because we've declared those variables. But we're actually not going to print that, because if you actually want to use a variable called a, you have to declare it inside the void main function, or you can't use it. Now there is an exception to this, and that's called declaring global variables, but we don't need to learn about those, so that's just a fact, I guess. But yeah, if you declare a variable in a certain function, you can only use that variable in that function. So now this is our add nums and multiply nums. So let's run our program, shall we? And also let's print the result. So we can say print C and then print C. Now let's run our program. And nothing happens. You might be wondering, why didn't anything happen? Because, well, we wrote code that's supposed to print C and print the addition and multiplication of these numbers, right? Well, that's a good question, and the reason nothing happened is because if you actually want a function other than the void main function to run whenever you click on the run button or whenever you compile your code, you have to call that function, or you have to write the name of that function inside the void main function. So you would have to say add nums and multiply nums if you actually wanted your program to work, or else it wouldn't. And again, the reason we're having this error over here is because, well, we didn't add a semicolon, and I didn't spell it right. But now it should work. So yeah, 5 plus 6 is 11, as you can see, and 7 times 8 is 56. So now here's what I want to do. Here's a program I want to make, all right? So I want to make a program that first of all adds the numbers 5 and 6, and also adds the numbers 7 and 8, and then multiplies the numbers, multiplies the addition of 5 and 6, 6 and 5, same thing, because of, the commutative property of addition, and the sum of 7 and 8. So you might be wondering, how could we do that? And remember, we have to do this using the functions that we have created. Well, to add 5 and 6, it's simple. We just say add nums, because as you can see, 5 and 6 are already the variables that we have declared, which is A and B, right? 5 and 6, pretty easy. But the problem arises when we have to add 7 and 8. So you might say, well, how are we going to add 7 and 8? Well, first of all, we need two add functions because we're going to add numbers on two separate instances. So let's write down the two add nums 2 times. Now you might be wondering, well, how am I going to add 7 and 8? Because our add nums function right now only adds the numbers 5 and 6 and nothing else. And you'll see that whenever we run our program, you can see both times it only adds the numbers 5 and 6, not 7 and 8. So how are we going to do that? And not only that, but also, what if and also you might say, well, maybe simply change the numbers to 7 and 8, right? No problem. But then another problem that arises is that, well, both times it adds the numbers 7 and 8 and not 5 and 6. So you might be wondering, well, is there any possible way to pass the values for int a and b, or the numbers 1 and 2, whenever we, call the function? Is there any way to say, hey, computer, when I say add nums over here, I want it to add 5 and 6. But whenever I say add nums over here, I want it to add 7 and 8. Well, you can actually do that, and it's quite easy. And that's why we have the input field over here. The input field over here allows us to take input from the user. So per se over here in our function, we need to take the input of int a and b, right? So what you're going to write over here is you're going to say, in these circle brackets, you're going to type in the variables that you want an input for. So in this case, we need a variable a, comma variable b. Now, as you can see, we have a variable a and a variable b, and the program won't run, or this function won't run unless until the user gives the function variable a and b. So you can take out these variables, and you can see these variables are essentially declared over here. So over here, now we can pass in the numbers 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Now let's run our program, shall we? And voila, we have our program working, 11 and 15. But there's another small problem, right? And that problem is that, well, now we have to multiply the addition of these two numbers. So now that we have the answer to these two numbers, we actually need to store the answer somewhere, and not just print those answers, because we're going to be using those answers again to multiply those two answers. Now, before we do that, since we have to pass in these variables, or since we have to pass in these different type of values, let's also to ask for input int a and int b for a multiply nums function. So over here in add nums, what we actually want is we want to store our result or our answer or the variable c into another variable in the void main function. So how are we going to do that? Well, you may think, well, can I just create a variable called int answer1 equal to add nums, and can I just do that? Maybe the add nums will not only print the answer, but also store the answer in the variable answer1, right? Well, our function won't do that right now with the code that we have provided. If we want our function to return a value, or if we want our function to so whenever our function is done, if we want our function to pass on a value and store it in whatever variable we assign that function to, if we wanted that to happen, in the function at the end, we simply say return, and then the value we want to return, or the value that we want to store in the given variable. In this case, we want to store c, so we can say c. And then I don't want to print the answers over here, so I'm going to take that out. So now what actually happens is the answer is not going to go ahead and print, but instead we're going to return the answer, which means that whatever answer or whatever the addition of a and b is going to be, that value is going to go ahead and store in answer 1. So let's also do that for answer 2. So we can say int answer 2 equal to add nums 7 and 8. And now, as you can see, we have almost our whole program done. We store the value for answer b. We store the value for the addition of 5 and 6. We store the value for the addition of 7 and 8. Now the only thing remaining is to multiply these. Now we can multiply these by saying, again, over here also, let's return c. And over here we can say int multiply nums. And then we want to multiply answer 1 and answer 2. And then we can say, oh, I'm sorry. Over here, we need to assign it to a value. So we can say, how about final answer, right? Final answer equal to multiply nums. And then we can print out final answer. There we go. And now if we run our program, you'll see we will get the answer 165, because 11 times 15 is 165. 5 plus 6 is 11. 7 plus 8 is 15. So 11 times 15 is 165. And we can double check that. 165. So we have our program done, and on the process we learned how to make our programmer or user give values or input to a function, and also what the return statement in the function does. That's all for this portion of the video. So yeah, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching the video, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and also turn on notifications. On the screen are some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like. If you do, please go ahead and check them out. Again, thank you for watching. I hope you guys learned something. That's all for this video. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.